Okay guys, so video for Monday, April 13th, 2020. Two key concepts, 2.3 exchange in the Indian Ocean, and 2.4 the Trans-Saharan trade. We've covered some talking points over these two things in the past, so I'm going to try and, like I always say, go through them as quickly as I can, but hopefully it'll be quicker than normal. So some context behind the Indian Ocean is that originally it began with very, very small trading settlements around 800 CE, and then eventually it declined in the 1500s when Portugal figured out the navigational routes around the western coast of Africa and basically took over the trade itself for its own profit. So it was run by civilizations or different cultures and groups along the Indian Ocean. As you can obviously see from the picture, it reaches parts of Africa all the way to India and then China. And then when the Portuguese/Europeans arrive, they're going to completely take over and completely monopolize the profit for themselves. So what you see is that you see an intensity between Africa and Asia, especially as these prosperous city-states began to flourish, and especially along the eastern coast of Africa. So some of these cities include Kiowa, Sofala, Mombasa, and Malindi. You have other cities that were more inland. The four that I mentioned before are coastal, and then you have some that are inland that were more focused on luxury items like gold, ivory, and iron. These materials were then sold to places like India, Southeast Asia, and China. And the reason that they could be sold at a profit is that they were very, very scarce in Asian countries. Asian countries didn't have these things, and so therefore they were considered luxury items, and you could sell them for a much higher price. Also, the eastern coast of Africa made for ideal centers of trade, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, you have the gold from the inland kingdoms, which is lucrative in itself. People want to go there, people want to travel there because they want the gold just because it's gold, it's wealth. Then you also have the fact that it's located in the Indian Ocean, and you have favorable wind and ocean currents. So the Indian Ocean is known for monsoon season, so depending on when you're traveling, it's actually ideal depending on certain months. So if you look at the picture, you actually see an arrow going up. If you were traveling between the months of April to September, that is when you would want to travel going towards that part of the world, because the fact that the currents, the wind, everything was going to be in your favor. Vice versa, on the opposite side, if you were traveling from November to February, then you'd want to go away from those areas because, again, the current, the winds would be much more suitable for your traveling needs. And so it's often referred to as a sailor's ocean because of the fact that once you could figure out the navigational kind of techniques to be able to coast along these waters, it was very, very easy. And so they liked the fact that it was very predictable patterns for them. Other than that, also, it was a fairly peaceful region. There wasn't a lot of conflicts between the groups or the cultures that lived there. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them were heavily Islamic, and so they had a lot of Islamic connections. And that kind of was a combining or I guess you can say, a joining factor that made them kind of all unified in some way. But most of them they wanted business to go on as usual. And so, fighting is bad for business, and therefore put it aside, squash it. It's going to hurt us economically. We're not going to deal with it. So as a response to increasing demand for trade in the Indian Ocean, you have an increasing demand for products as well, which has some long-lasting impacts on the Indian Ocean trade routes. People had to figure out ways to find more efficient routes to get to the Indian Ocean, especially how to make more crops, how to grow more crops, make more textiles, and how to manufacture more iron. So in some places, the role of the state is actually going to increase even more to oversee this efforts. What does that mean? It means the government is going to play a much more active role in being involved in how they're going to handle trade. So instead of it being up to traders or merchants or just your average everyday businessmen, now the government is getting involved and doing things like creating a customs department, creating taxes, creating ports, eventually creating like a passport type of system where people can and cannot travel in certain areas, or they do have permission to be here and not here, and things like that, because they do want it to run a lot more smoothly. For example, one of the kingdoms, the Indian Rajput kingdom, the kingdom of Gujarat, it's going to become the go-between between the Eastern world and the Western world. And if you looked at the revenue at the time from just the customs, just the amount of money that is coming into the country from the customs department, it actually measured more of the entire wealth than some European states combined. So the picture that I put there is a picture of the ancient kingdom of, Guarahat. You also have Swahili city-states. Swahili actually means coast or coaster. So Swahili city-states are states that are located along the coast. And these become thriving cities because, they're easy to get to. They're coastal cities. They're located near water, obviously. And so there's going to be some major port cities that pop up there. And these port cities are also going to become major commercial areas as well. Kiowa, like I mentioned, Mombasa, which is modern-day Kenya. We don't call it Mombasa anymore. Zanzibar, which is modern-day Tanzania. And then you also have trading happening off the Zanj coast, which is the word Arabic. The name Zanj is in Arabic because of the fact that they had so many Islamic merchants coming to this area. Here, people would sell ivory, gold, and even slaves to their Arab trading partners. You would find that the interaction between them and other places, such as travelers or merchants coming off the Silk Road, was very, very common because you find Chinese porcelain in a lot of these ancient remains. So that tells you that a lot of interaction was happening between these groups. The ruins in Kiowa actually suggest that it was a very, very wealthy kingdom because the ruins are usually made up of stone or coral, and these things are hard to come by. They are costly. They would have it required the use of engineers, some kind of labor work or division, and so it doesn't mean that they just lived, like in mud huts and clay buildings like they previously did. They were now creating permanent settlements, permanent buildings with materials that are very, very hard to come by. And so the fact that the ruins and the remains are still there show us that they did have and obtain some type of high level of wealth or status. Some significant cultural transfers. We did talk about this gentleman here. So you're going to have an exchange of culture, technology, commerce, religion, all of that intensified as the Indian Ocean trade area picked up in traffic. And so you're going to see the voyages of the Muslim Admiral Zheng He reflect this transfer. So in the 1400s, roughly, there was a Ming emperor. His name was Yongle. He had actually sent Zheng He on 7 voyages. And the goal of these voyages was pretty much just to show off the wealth of the Ming kingdom. And the reason for that is, if you remember the song, I'm going to sing it really quickly. Shang Zhu Chen Han, Sang Zhu Chen Han, Sui Tang Song, Wan Minqing Republic, Mao Zedong. Okay, so the dynasty right before the Ming dynasty is the Yuan dynasty, which was the Mongols, which we talked about last week. The Mings are trying to erase all Mongol history, all Mongol influence. They want to just completely reestablish themselves as the authentic Chinese divine rulers of this time. And so how better to solidify that you have power than just showing off your wealth? And so Zheng He would go on these voyages to exotic places, to foreign places, to pretty much just, as you all would say, like flex. He wants to show that the Ming dynasty and the Ming kingdom is somebody you don't want to mess with. So he traveled to Indonesia, other places like Arabia. He traveled off the coast of Africa. He even traveled to the Cape of Good Hope, which is at the southern tip of Africa, and we'll get to why it's called the Cape of Good Hope in a minute. And it was, like I said, to display the might of the dynasty, but it was also sometimes to receive tribute, which is pretty crazy because people would actually pay him to just go there and show up. So almost like a celebrity, when you pay them a fee, like an appearance fee, people would be like, oh my god, that's Zheng He, he's totally here. And then he would just go and show up. So there's the Emperor Yongle from the Ming dynasty. The Cape of Good Hope, like I mentioned, is there at the very, very bottom of the southern tip of Africa. It was actually renamed by Vasco da Gama. So Vasco da Gama is one of these Portuguese explorers, European explorers that's going to come later in the late 1400s. The reason that it was named the Cape of Good Hope is because when European travelers are traveling along the western coast of Africa, it's not necessarily treacherous territory, but it's a very dangerous journey, and you're gone for months at a time, and it's very, very unpredictable as to what you're going to come across. And so if you can make it past the Cape of Good Hope, if you can round that southern tip part of Africa, it's almost like you're home free. And then if you look at it where it's at, you will notice that that's also the area or the territory where the Indian Ocean kind of comes into play. And remember, that's a sailor's ocean. People want to go there. The waters are calm. The waters are chill. It's a lot less volatile. It's a lot more predictable. And so it's the Cape of Good Hope, because if you can make it to that point, well, papitas, it's going to be easy from here on out. Zheng He's fleet was very, very impressive. He had about 300 ships that carried about 28,000 people. That is a lot back then. If you're going to look at maybe even going and jumping way past like World War I want to say the British Navy probably had 33 battleships. That's not a lot compared to 300. So a fleet of this size is showing off. These expeditions would win the prestige for the Chinese government. They would also open up new markets for the Chinese government and goods as well. So they would take stuff and trade with other people, and then people would, drink their tea or wear their silks, and then they would want to continue to buy those products or buy those things. And so it's also a good commerce kind of mechanism, if you will. He also returned to China with exotic treasures, so things that people in China had never seen before, giraffes, and then he brought other different types of understanding back to the world that China had never seen before, and that is actually going to be a problem, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it also encouraged people to immigrate out of China, which is going to be another problem. So the reason that it's a problem, if China is trying to reestablish itself as this very magnanimous, divine, we are the authentic rulers of China, you're bringing in foreign things from outside of China, then you're encouraging people to travel outside of China. How is that restoring the greatness of China? And so the idea of diversity and tolerance wasn't a very, very big thing for the Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty did promote Confucianism, which promoted and specifically was all about a stable agrarian, which is like agriculture, lifestyle. And scholars, the educated class, was actually worried that a lot of this interaction was going to cause people to want to leave and people to want to interact or mix with these foreigners, which was looked down upon as far as they saw it. And so they saw other cultures as barbaric, they saw them as inferior, and sometimes they just figured, you know what, these voyages are just too expensive, we're wasting a lot of money, there's no real point for it. So Yonggle's successor, his son, Zhu Gaozi, actually ended these travels. And not only did he end Zheng He's travels, but he actually made it a point to outlaw any ships that were larger than 2 masts to be built. So the masts on a ship are the big thing that carry the sails, and those are important because the more masts you have, the farther you can travel, because the more wind they pick up and the faster you can go. The less that you have, you're basically just going to travel from, rivers and lakes and things that are small and not big open ocean areas. And so the idea that making shipbuilding illegal or making this big shipbuilding illegal was really sending a message to people like, you're not leaving China, like you're not going anywhere. And that's pretty much what happened. There are 7 voyages, and you will notice that there is a huge gap between the last and the final voyage, and that has a lot to do with the Confucian scholars really wanting to stop the Zheng He voyages and travels, to all these different places. So 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, they're pretty back-to-back. Then there's a little bit of spacing between the 5th and the 6th, and then a huge gap between his last and final voyage. All of this was made possible because of the new maritime inventions. So maritime has to do with the sea. Remember, my Spanish speakers, look at the word maritime. It begins with mar. Mar is ocean or sea. And so all of these help the sailors be able to navigate better in the ocean. So you have the lateen sail, which is a triangular sail. There's a picture of it there. And it has a 45-degree angle. The more sails that you have, the more wind you can pick up. And the faster you can go, especially if the current is in your favor. You have the creation of the Astrolabe, which was actually used for different purposes, but most of the time it was used to make astronomical measurements, typically the altitudes of celestial bodies. So what that means is it's kind of like a compass, but a little bit more advanced, because it actually calculates your latitude and your longitude. It can tell you physical locations. The compass is a little bit different because the compass will just tell you cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. And it is magnetic, so it relies on things found in the earth or geographic elements to be able to help you figure out those directions. And then lastly, you have the Tao ship, which was a Chinese invention that was traditional sailing vessels with one or more masts. And the dhow ships are usually also sometimes called junk ships because they were used to carry big, bulky, large amounts of items. Okay, so trans-Saharan trade routes, context 2.4. The trans-Saharan trade was it was one of the four original main ones, but what happened is that very few societies had inhabited the Sahara Desert because it is a desert. And so unless you are well equipped to deal with the atmosphere and the surrounding environment of a desert, you're not going to know how to navigate the ways around it. And so very few groups, very few societies had access to the trade in this area. However, the volume of trade did increase with the arrival of Muslim merchants in the 7th and 8th centuries. And then you have this guy who's a picture there of him. His name was Ibn Battuta, or Battuta, depending on how you want to pronounce it. He was a Muslim scholar and explorer. So the Europeans had Marco Polo, the Muslims had Ibn Battuta. He reported that merchants and traders used caravans to facilitate commerce. Africans traded things like gold, ivory, hides, and slaves. For Arab and Berber peoples, Berber are indigenous people of North Africa. They also traded salt, cloth, paper, and horses. So this map is an ancient map of what the trans-Saharan trade routes would have looked like. I showed you this map early on in the school year, and we talked about why there's different pictures and why there's different things on there and why some objects are bigger than others. And then you guys were the ones that came to the conclusion about these guys who look pretty important were probably the rulers of these areas. And then we talked about why the importance of knowing that is because you really don't want to offend anyone, especially if you are going into a neighboring kingdom. So it was very important to know where you were going, who was the ruler, who was in charge, what were the rules, what was expected, or where could you find stuff. Because if you notice, there's a lot of little notations on there that tell you where certain goods could be found in certain areas. The Trans-Saharan Desert is immense. It's huge. It's 3.6 million square miles, and only about 800 square miles of it are oases. That means only about 800 square miles actually have water and make it possible for human settlement, for humans to be able to survive. And that is only because water from deep, deep underground is brought to the surface, which makes it fertile, which makes things grow, which also provides water, which people need to drink and feed their animals and other things like that. In some times, this occurs naturally, but in other times, humans actually have to dig these up themselves to have access to the water. Then you have the camels and the saddle, which we've kind of already talked about with the one that we talked about when we talked about Africa and Mansa Musa and Mali and all those things. So I'm going to go through this one kind of quickly. They use camels to travel across the Sahara. Camels, we mentioned, are important because they've already adapted to the environment. They're native to the Islamic heartland, which is Arabia. They began to appear in North Africa around the 3rd century BCE. They're accustomed to the desert, they're accustomed to the harshness, and they have adapted to living well in the Sahara. Compared to horses and donkeys, camels can consume large quantities of water. They can drink about 50 gallons in 3 minutes, and then they don't need to drink water for very, very long periods of time. And they store it, and they've already become accustomed to it, they're suited to it. So that's why the Trans-Sahara trade routes are limited mostly to camels. You also have the development of the camel saddle, which is a form of technology, which is a new invention. There's several different types, including probably 15 for all different purposes. The South Arabians developed a saddle in which the rider sits in the back of the hump. I'll show you a picture. This one's easier because the rider can actually hold the hair of the hump. The Northern Arabians developed a saddle for sitting on top of the hump. This puts them higher up, which means they had greater visibility in battle. So you can obviously tell which between the two groups was more aggressive. The saddle, however, that had the greatest impact was the one that the Somalians created in Eastern Africa. And the reason for that is because theirs is much more spaced out, and theirs was really focused on trade. And it was meant to, displace the weight, so that's not all in one area, and the camel is not feeling the burden in one specific place, but it's kind of spread out, and so it makes it easier for them to carry. They can carry up to 600 pounds at a time. So it is going to become very, very useful for trade. So you have some pictures, the one where the guy is holding actually the camel in the back, the one on the North Arabian one where the guy is holding or would be sitting on the camel in the front. And then some earlier versions that are pretty basic. One is pretty much just meant for holding on, and then the other one is going to be used for displacing that weight so the weight is distributed evenly amongst the animal's back. Caravans were important. Caravans provided safety. So these were hundreds of people, thousands of animals, and lots and lots and lots of goods. And so the problem with this is that if you're out in the desert, you're going to be out there for long periods of time. So they actually developed and created these caravanseries, these mini hotels, marketplaces, resting areas in the middle of the desert, or in long stretches at least, because it's very, very dangerous. These journeys are intense. You would have to take enough provisions with you, enough goods with you, enough fresh water to make sure that everybody in your caravan survived. And if not, you were going to have to make frequent pit stops because you're going to die. It's extremely, extremely dangerous. And then people walked most of the way because the camels, were carrying the loads of the goods and stuff that was being traded. Some of the trade that was done along the trade route is going to be gold. Gold is probably the most precious commodity that is being traded along this area. West African merchants acquired most of it from the waters of the Senegal River. Foreigners came not only in search of gold, but also ivory and slaves too. Especially this is going to increase and go crazy when the Europeans show up in the 1400s. It'll begin first with the Portuguese, and then the Spanish will perpetuate the trade of the slave trade. It'll eventually become the I forgot. I totally lost my train of thought. It'll eventually become triangular trade, or the transatlantic slave trade movement. So for the next 700 years, the trans-Saharan trade is going to bring considerable wealth to several societies in West Africa, Ghana and Mali specifically. But they also brought Islam, which is going to spread further into sub-Saharan Africa as a result of that. So Senegal River stretches mostly from the western coast and then goes all along some parts to even deeper inland. The picture that you guys see there is a photograph, so it's a more modern, but not as modern. It's the early 1900s, maybe 1800s, which was ivory hunting. They would hunt the elephants for their tusk or other animals that have ivory. Even today, we see some elephants that have started to not grow tusks anymore as an evolutionary defense mechanism, which is insane. But they would steal the ivory, they would cut it off for luxury items, hairbrushes and piano keys and tile in your bathroom floor, like crazy, crazy, crazy ridiculous things. But the fact that it was considered precious and rare, it was sought after. And then the kingdoms that I talked about, you have Ghana, you have Mali here in the purple on the left or the western coast of Africa. But you also have Timbuktu and Gao, which I mentioned also when I talked about Africa. So I'll talk about them in a minute. Ghana was actually called the land of gold. And the oddest thing about it is that there's actually no gold in Ghana. So why would it be called the land of gold if there's actually physically no gold in Ghana? Well, the trade routes passed through Ghana. So in order to get from where the gold was to the western coast of Africa, you had to go through this city. So the kings actually figured out something really, really smart. The kings began taxing everyone entering and exiting the kingdom. You want to try and go around us? Sure. You're probably going to die because there's people, soldiers, guards, borders, everything set up around the territory to prevent this from happening. So the easier, safer thing was just to pay your tax and go through the country. Kings in Ghana would then use their wealth to build up a very, very powerful army and continue to perpetuate this peace within the empire. You're going to see some religious invasions in the 1100s that are going to eventually lead to the destruction of these Western African kingdoms. So Ghana itself actually goes to war with a couple of neighboring societies, which weakened it. Mali rises up in power, and it becomes one of the largest trading cities. North African traders actually introduced Mali to Islam in the 9th century, and Mali profited greatly from the gold trade also. It also did tax nearly every other trade as well. So it continues and perpetuates like this customs of importing, exporting goods. Most of Mali's residents were farmers who cultivated sorghum and rice. So sorghum is kind of like what you use to make syrup, molasses, things. Timbuktu and Gao accumulated most of the wealth, and they also developed into centers of Muslim life, especially centers for learning. People came here to study. Books that were here went for higher prices than most places because of the fact that they were from these places. And so it was just the name that made them more popular. And you have some pictures. So Timbuktu, Gao, what a city from far away would have looked like. So again, I talked about these cities being architecturally designed. So they are designed very strategically. There's a pattern. They're not just willy-nilly, like let's just build here and whatever. They are designed with a purpose. And then there's a picture of sorghum. So eventually there is a process. I don't know how to explain it, but you get syrup from it. The expanding role of states in Africa. So because, again, of growth in trade and wealth, the state needs to intervene to be able to administer and maintain the empire. So the state is going to have to establish a currency, money, whose value is widely understood. So how are you going to pay me? How am I going to get paid? How am I going to make money off of this? In Mali, the currency was cowrie shells, which is a picture up there, cotton cloth, gold, glass beads, and salt. All of those things had value, and so therefore they equaled money. Rulers also needed to protect the trade routes, and so they would use other things and other goods, so the currency and the harvests, to make sure that their soldiers were also taken care of. So they would pay their soldiers in these goods, and then make sure the soldiers would then protect the area, protect wherever it was that they were stationed and supposed to be protecting. Some empires expanded their reach to overtake resource-rich areas, which is going to cause conflict with some other countries and some other territories that we'll see in a minute. And so military forces became very, very important in Western Africa. The picture that you guys see there, some people argue whether it's Sundiata, we talked about him too, the Lion Prince, or whether it was his grandson, Mansa Musa. They're both from Mali, but regardless of the fact that you can tell that this is a very clearly organized army. They're organized, they have armor, they have weapons, they have horses, their horses have armor, and so they are not messing around. They are going to collect their taxes, they're going to collect their money, they're going to protect their goods, and they're going to do what they need to do to make sure their kingdom keeps thriving. The decline of Mali eventually happens when the Songhai Empire, which is another Western empire in Africa, actually takes its place. So basically what ends up happening is these little kingdoms in West Africa start to overtake each other, which is similar to what happened with the Sumerian kingdoms that we talked about way, way, way back in Mesopotamia. Songhai will eventually become larger and richer than Mali, and even despite Mali falling, Mansa Musa's efforts to strengthen Islam in West Africa are going to succeed. So his legacy continues on even after he passes away and even after the kingdom of Mali falls. What you also see, and we're almost getting to the end, I promise, is the rise of capital cities. Capital cities are going to be really important to trade. And this is not just for the Trans-Sahara or the Indian Ocean, this is for all of them. So including the Silk Road and including the Mediterranean trade routes. So they're important because they become capitals of trade. So people are buying, selling, innovating, and communicating with each other. People are performing religious rituals, so they're centers for shows of power for these rulers, centers of sacrifice and obedience, because you have to show that you are obedient and you are behaving and you are obeying the laws as well. And they're also centers for political administration. These rulers are going to create very large, elaborate kingdoms for themselves, again, to showcase their power. They're trade centers. They show authority. They really, really want to emphasize that this is where, headquarters is. It's the home base. It's the bat cave. It's whatever you want to call it. But this is where I'm controlling everything from. This is ground control, and everything that's going to be important is decided here, right now. So some of these major cities are Persepolis in Persia, which is the one on the far right. That's more of the square towers that you guys see on the right-hand side. You have Chang'an, which is the in China. You have Pataliputra, which is in India, which is the one I have right there, the more with the round kind of dome shape. You have Athens in Greece, Carthage in Africa. I'll show you those on the next slide right now. You have Rome in Rome, so I didn't put it twice. Alexandria in Egypt. And then you have Constantinople in Eurasia. And the reason I put Eurasia is because technically its borders really, really close on both. Some people will argue about that, but it's going to be the center or the capital for two different empires, the Byzantine Empire and the Ottoman Empire. Byzantine is Europe, Ottoman is going to be Asia, because it's the Seljuk Turks that are eventually going to take over this territory or this area. So Athens, Greece at the very, very top. Every city in Greece had a Parthenon or had like an Acropolis temple, a main location or a main area for the citizens to go to if they needed protection. The one on the bottom is Egypt or Alexandria. The photo I actually have there is where I told you again the story of the Library of Alexandria being burned down. I'd love to show you guys that picture because it really infuriates me to no end that Octavian or Augustus, whatever he wants to call himself, would burn down the library just to erase all of, their history. And then the other one is the famous Roman Colosseum. Romans loved their dome or their circular shaped event centers, if you will call them, but other types of architecture as well. And so that one is pretty much a staple of Roman architecture. The last two are kind of a little bit different. So when I showed you the first photo on the left-hand side in class, a lot of you actually said that that was Rome because you immediately saw the round-shaped looking Colosseum type middle center area and you're like, oh, that's Rome. That's actually Carthage in North Africa, and that's because it was conquered by Rome. So when Rome took over Carthage, they basically remade it in their image, and so a lot of the architecture is going to be modeled after Roman architecture. The very, very last photo is Constantinople. And the picture that you guys see, or the very, very big image you see in the background, the dome-shaped image, is the Hagia Sophia. It's the Church of the Highest Wisdom. It was originally a Christian church of Eastern Orthodox, so similar to the Catholic Church in Rome, but it's the Eastern version. So it was a beautiful, beautiful church commissioned by Justinian. People said it was basically heaven on earth, extremely beautiful. When the city Constantinople is captured in 1453 by the Ottomans and Mehmet II, he actually transforms it into a mosque. So it's still there today in Istanbul. They didn't destroy it. They didn't burn it down. They just converted it. And so a lot of the imagery that you're going to see inside the church/mosque is a mixture of Christian and Islamic syncretism. It's a blending of both religions. Okay, last and final thing, your DBQ source. You have an exit ticket. You have 2 questions. It's already uploaded on Google Classroom. I'm giving you guys until Wednesday, I believe, to go ahead and turn this in. So on Tuesday, I'm not giving you guys a lesson or a lecture. I'm just giving you time to read this, go over the slides, and then answer the 2 questions as well. I'm going to move myself for a brief second. Let me see if I can go a little bit lower there. Okay. So your job is to read the DBQ, answer the 2 questions. Why am I having you guys do this? I did already mention that the AP exam has moved its format to a DBQ, and so I want you guys reading a lot more documents on your own. I'm not going to explain it. I just want to read what you guys submit when you ask me, and you answer the purpose, and you answer whether or not the document does support the travels. And the reason why I ask you those 2 questions, or the other question is the connection question, when you're using DBQs, one of the strategies when they want you to break down paragraphs is they want you to use the strategy HIP. HIP stands for historical context, intended audience, point of view, and purpose. Purpose is always the easiest one because you basically just have to tell me what is the purpose of this document. Why was this document created? Whenever somebody was writing this, what was the intended effect? And so purpose is the easiest one to answer. The second one is going to be more towards the point of view because you're going to have to decide whether or not this document supports one point of view or it goes against another point of view. So that's your assignment. It's due on Wednesday, I believe. If you have any questions, text me, call me, email me. You have all my information on Google Classroom. I'm always available. And then I am going to give you a hint. So I mentioned that on Friday, you guys are going to be writing a DBQ, a timed DBQ for 45 minutes. It's going to be an open window on Google Classroom, and then once that window is shut, you have that no more time to submit the assignment. Very, very similar to the way the AP exam is going to be set up. I will give you a hint, though, because I'm not going to give you any prep material on it. I'm not going to show you the documents ahead of time. I'm just going to tell you roughly or generally what the topic is going to be about. So it's roughly going to be about technological innovations between 1450 and 1750. These are all technological innovations between 1450 and 1750. I hope you guys had a happy Easter. I don't know what else to say. I miss you guys. I miss my crazy, silly class. I miss telling you guys hocus pocus, time to focus. I miss that's the way, I like it. I miss all those things with you guys. I miss your craziness and your silliness. And I miss yelling at you to get out of my classroom and everything else I can think of. So I hope you guys are staying safe. I miss you again, and I hope you guys reach out if you have any other questions. Bye.